Glory to you, Lord Christ.
The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove them out of the temple, both with the sheep and cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it again." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scriptures and the word that Jesus had spoke. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Please be seated. Lord, where shall I find you? High and hidden is your place. Where shall I not find you? The world is full of thy glory. I have sought thy nearness, and with all my heart have I cried unto thee, and going out to meet thee, I find thee coming to me. It's a beautiful prayer written by Yehuda Halevi, 10th century Jewish Sephardic physician and also a poet and philosopher, written in Spain. His question is, where's God? Where's God not? And this is the very question that we're looking at today, written in the scriptures today from John, because that is a very central topic. And the way we get at that particular understanding is by looking at the story of the temple. We know the story very well. In fact, many of you can quote it much better than I can. And the idea is that Jesus goes to the temple, he clears out the temple. And we read it in Mark, Matthew, and Luke, but we read it usually at the end of the Gospels. And we know that at the end of the Gospels, this leads to Jesus' arrest, his conviction, and also his death. But today we read it in John, and John has a specific twist that he offers us because John doesn't put it in the end, John puts it in the beginning. And the idea of putting it in the beginning is because there's something very important for John that wants to communicate to the people of something about the temple. Now, notice that in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus calls them a den of thieves, right? But here in the Gospel of John, he calls them, "Stop making our house a marketplace." Well, that's very interesting because really, truly, when people went for their services at that time, they had to offer sacrifices. Now, they had no other place to buy the sacrifices but in the temple where it was made available. And so you didn't have people walking around with doves in their pockets or rams and sheeps, in their shoulders. They had to go there and buy it, and then after buying it, offer it to the God of the temple. And so Jesus is not really challenging that particular point. What he's challenging them by saying that you have made a house a marketplace is because John and Jesus, in this particular way of seeing Jesus in John, is that Jesus comes and the temple is to be replaced completely replaced. And we read later on in a couple of chapters that Jesus is talking to the Samaritan woman by the well, and he says, there'll be the day when you will not worship God on the Mount Gerizim, nor in Jerusalem, but you will worship God everywhere. And especially the idea was that when Jesus was finally put to death, and not because of the temple, by the way, but he was put to death because he raised Lazarus in the Gospel of John. When he was put to death and was raised and the ascension happened, Jesus then made himself and God's availability everywhere. The question is, where is God? Is God only found in the temple? Because for the Jews, God was only found in the temple. There was no other place. God was in the temple. And remember that in the Exodus story, when God lifted up and he left by a pillar of fire at night, and during the day was a cloud, and they followed him throughout the desert. So for them, God was in a specific stone building or a building made of materials. To them, God was in a certain place. And Jesus is saying that God is covenanting with us, not in one specific place, but in every place. And we get that sense from the psalm where it says God is everywhere. The handiwork of God is all around us. The beauty of the Lord is revealed in everything, in the skies above and in the waters below. Where is God for you? Where is God for us? And the question obviously is, why do we come to church? If that's the case, if God is not in the church, why bother coming? Right? Although today is a special day because we finally have to see you people here again. And we're very happy to see you with us today. But God is not only in the temple, God is not only in the church, God is everywhere. And that's why it says, where can I find you? High and hidden is your place. Where can I not find you? The world is full of thy glory. Because we come to church to learn about God and what God means and where God is expressed, and the gravitational pull of the church is to throw us out into the world, not the other way around. Many people feel that they have to come into the church to experience God, to know God, to understand God. And what we want to do in the church here is to teach you that God is outside these walls. God's in the world, God's in among us, but that God is in everything. And so God is freeing us to see that God is not just a creed. God is not just a dogma. God is just not a sacrament. God is just not a particular practice or ritual that we perform or follow. God is inherent in every life being that's around us, and every moment and every experience and every opportunity for us to engage the otherness of life. And so Jesus is trying to teach these people, and it was pretty radical. And that's why he said, destroy the temple, and in 3 days we have it again. And they're trying to figure, wow, it took 46 years to put this temple together. How are you? He was talking about his body. He was once resurrected, and once he was resurrected, he made himself available to the world. Now, I'm not saying that he wasn't available before. I'm saying that at least in the story that we read in the gospel, we learn that. We need to learn that God is in the world. We haven't been taught that. We haven't known that. And so we come to church to learn that Jesus is teaching us that he's beyond the walls of this church, as well as within the walls of this church. And that we find him in every type of relationship that we have, at every encounter, and every moment in which we find ourselves challenged to become more, to question, to love, to worship, to deal with the complexities and the uncertainties of life. God is everywhere, and God is in everything, and everything is in God. And to see that is to experience the mystical reality of God's presence in the world. To see that everything indeed is holy. Every bush is aflame with God. Everything is alive with the reality of God's illumination, luminous presence. And we cannot escape that. We cannot move away from God's invitation to participate with each other. What is the Gospel of John? The first thing it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And then what? The Word was what? Was God. It was God. The Word was God. And what the word means, logos, right? The conversation, the narrative, the reality that we exchange, you and I, every single day, the way we communicate, the way we understand, the language that we use to lift up the feelings of our lives to each other, to be able to connect symbolically in ways that others can't with each other through these words, through God. The Word is God. The exchange of my saying to you, good day, I care for you, I understand you. These are the words of God. I love you, I forgive you. These are the words of God. So where do you find God in your life? Are you still limited to just the church, to the sacraments, to the creeds that we say every Sunday? Or can you see God now in sunshine? Can you see God in the blooming of flowers? And pretty soon we're seeing that already. Would you believe that next week is spring? They're going to pull the hour ahead. It's already here, once again. And there's life everywhere. Around where I live, all the birds are singing. And new birds that I haven't heard in a while, they sound like hungry songbirds, man. They're out there trying to catch their friends and mates and so forth, and they're singing beautiful songs. There's life brimming in everything. Fresh colors coming up, new flowers, new winds and breezes. The rain cleaned up the trees and it cleaned everything. There's a freshness about us. There's a newness in the air. Creation is here again. And God is everywhere. And maybe once in a while we'll pay attention to it. We'll hear a bird and we'll say, oh, beautiful. We'll see a sunset. Oh, that was so nice. We'll hear our grandchild's voice and we'll say, what a gift. But you see, this is where God is. Because God is everywhere that you pay attention to life. God is everywhere where you accept the gift of being. God is everywhere where you can experience love and truth and goodness with each other. God is even in the places where we struggle to understand, where we can't figure it out. When we find ourselves anxious or maybe lonely, because these are the moments in which you feel the aloneness of the alone. God is there. Where are you not, O God? And Jesus is saying, I'm everywhere. And so he's helping us to lift our ideas of God in any one specific place. The access mundi is a word that people used to use where they would have a place that was sacred and special, that they would go and only God was there. There was a God of the mountain. There was a God of the valley. There was a God of the ocean. There was a God of the trees. But that's the only place they found God. But imagine finding God in everything and walking around and listening to the voice of God, the movement of God, the wooing of God who wants you all the time in his presence. But it's a gift that we can only acknowledge when we see it, when we open ourselves to it. And we need to be taught that. And that's why you come to church, to learn that God is everywhere, that God is here, that we participate, we learn the story of God, and we take the story in our lives. We accommodate our lives within the story that's given us. And the story must not be limited. The story must not be a final story. It must be one that's continuous, one that's emerging and coming forth. The story of God is never ending. And our part and place in it is what attributes to its movement forward. And so your lives matter. Everything you do, every moment that you experience, every sigh that you offer, every tear you drop, everything that you have is what God includes in the story, because you're so precious to God. And so today, Jesus is trying to get us to see that we cannot box God in. We cannot contain God, which is something that was tried many times. For the Jews, and I'll tell you, this may not sound fair, but this is true. They tried to limit God to the Bible, to the Torah. God took it away. They tried to limit God to the temple. He destroyed it. They tried to limit God to the land. He took it away. To tell them everywhere that I am is where I am. Not in one place, but in every place. And we talk about idol worship. The worst thing that we want to do is think that God is limited to any one place or thought or person. That is idol worship. And today you shall not have any other God before me, or make an image of any God. And this is the challenge that we have, to open our minds, to free ourselves from the limitations we impose on ourselves. And that we think only these are the right ways to be in the world. These are the absolute understandings that must be championed and put over other people. But it is a constant flux, the way of being with God. It's a constant movement, and it's amorphous. You're not certain about it, but you have a sense it's true. It's real. It moves you forward. God is wooing us into God's self, into relationship. And those things that you love in your life, those things that bring you beauty, those things that bring you a sense of completeness, listen to them, follow them, open your heart and minds to them, because these are the clues that will lead you into the depth of the reality of God. So I want to give you some homework. I want you to find where God is for you in your life. I want you to think, when you go and you play your music, or you walk on the beach, or you're in the valleys, or in the mountaintops, can you see God there? Is God there? What is it that God is there? You see, it's that we have an image of God, and that limits the reality of God. So we have to try to understand God from a different place. We have to understand God from our inner being and not from our minds. And we're not reducing God to the image. We're not trying to reduce, we're trying to expand ourselves to the reality of that God. So when you go for a beach walk, or when you're great with your grandchild, or you're doing something outside, allow yourself to flutter in the feelings and allow yourself to be in different levels of that feeling so that you can allow God to fill you in a new way and touch you and open us. And then I want you to share it with me. I want you to send me an email, send me a picture, and tell me, this is where I find God. This is where I see God. Even at work, some of you may still be working pretty hard too. Is God at work? Is God in your office? Is God in your school class? Is God in your construction position? Yes. See God there. Try to find where God is. And then that way you feel the presence everywhere you are. You don't feel extracted and you don't feel alienated from life, and you have to come to church because you feel disconnected. You'll be connected everywhere, even in prison, even on a desert, even on a boat, even on a battlefield. You're not alone. And so God is offering us a wholly new vision of who God is and where God is. We didn't know that before, but now we do, because Jesus says the temple, once it is raised, everyone who believes has access. And we, as baptized believers of Christ, have access to this. If I were to tell you have access to the greatest energy, to the greatest wisdom, to the greatest truth and beauty in the world, would you not take part of it? Would you not grasp it immediately? Or would you say, maybe tomorrow? I don't have time. I don't really want to make an effort. It's here now. It's available to all of us. You have to want it. And when you've wanted it and you get it, you'll realize how much you wanted it all along. And God bless us to do that. Amen.